Welcome, everyone. We will kick off. Welcome to another day of the St. Bridget's Festival. So just to begin, as is our practice in British Columbia, we begin with acknowledging the traditional territories where we live and work. So I would like to acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places near and far and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. So the St. Bridget's Day Festival here in Vancouver is for the beginning of spring and a time of renewal. In 2020, we joined 35 Irish diplomatic missions and many other community groups from Washington to Moscow to honor Ireland's matriarchal saint. So now in our week-long virtual event, we welcome participants from around the world to celebrate the creativity of Irish women. Now in our week-long virtual event also, we still have many other events taking place later in the week. So definitely check out our website and sign up to those too. So to kick us off today, I am just going to give you a brief overview of myself and I suppose why I'm here in front of you today and what everyone else or who else is joining us today. So I will be joined today by three other panelists. I will be joined by Dr. Maura Dernan, Susie Newman, and Gillian Goulding. So first off, I will start by telling you a bit about myself and my work with some organizations around mental health. So I am a committee member of Darkness into Light Vancouver. I'm a content coordinator for Irish in BC, and I run the Irish in Vancouver Meetups Facebook page. So a quick overview of myself. I'm originally from Dublin and I moved to Canada nearly 6 years ago. Initially, I was in Toronto. I worked there in marketing for Tourism Ireland and was involved also with Darkness into Light Toronto. So I moved west just over 2 years ago and joined Darkness into Light Vancouver and set up a meetup group as well for the Irish here in Vancouver, hosting social events in pubs and organizing hikes and beach gatherings, just in order to provide like an opportunity for people to connect, because I originally heard that it can be quite hard to meet people in this city, and I've definitely experienced that as well. But unfortunately, that's all on hold at the moment with the current restrictions. I still work in the travel industry, but in my spare time, I am passionate about supporting the Irish community, which is why I'm here. Coming to Vancouver, it was a natural fit for me to then get involved with Darkness into Light again here. For those not familiar, Darkness into Light is a morning walk that involves a 5-kilometer walk or run beginning at 4:30 a.m., where participants walk from literal darkness into the morning light, all in the name of mental health awareness and suicide prevention. Darkness into Light was started in 2009 by Pieta House, an Irish mental health charity. It started with just 400 people walking in the Phoenix Park in Dublin. In 2019, we had over 250,000 walkers globally in over 16 countries and 5 continents. The Vancouver initiative then was born in 2014. Some of you who attended this mental health panel talk last year at the St. Bridget's Festival may remember our chair, Amy, who was on the panel then. She would have loved to have been here again today, but she recently gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. So her hands are a little tied at the moment, but she's very tied. It's very sad to be missing tonight. And Amy really was the force behind setting up Darkness into Light Vancouver. She tragically lost her mum in 2012 to suicide. Amy is a powerhouse of a woman and is so inspiring in how she used her grief and channeled it into something as special as Darkness into Light. All of the committee members are so grateful for what she has put together to support the Irish community here in Vancouver. Also, every year we team up with a local charity partner. So 50% of the funds from the walk for the participation fee go to them, as well as any funds that are raised here locally. So any events that we run, such as quizzes and things like that. Over the years, we've worked with many different local charity partners. We've worked with the BC Crisis Centre. We've worked with the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Vancouver Fraser branch, specifically for their Safe Talk training, which provided free free training to community members on how to spot the signs of suicide, which is obviously so important. And our current partner is the Kettle Society, located on the downtown east side here in Vancouver. Every time that we have walked through the doors of the Kettle Society, you can really feel how much of a special place that it is. And they serve over 6,000 individuals each year. They work with people living with mental illness, poverty, homelessness, and substance abuse. They manage over 400 units of supportive housing, and they operate a mental health drop-in centre, which provide meals every single day of the year. And we're so proud of the work that they do here in Vancouver. In 2009, we had nearly 500 people participate in our walk here at Burnaby Lake, and we raised over $27,000. A big thank you to anyone here on the call who's ever walked with us, donated a prize, or volunteered your time. Since COVID, our main aim has been to maintain our social media presence because that's all we've kind of been able to do. So thankfully, the brand Darkness into Light is well recognized within the Irish community now. So we want to continue sharing messages to break down the stigma of mental health and suicide and be that point of contact that someone may need when they don't know where to start or where to look. As Google can be very overwhelming at times to try and find support locally, and especially if you're not in a great headspace. So on our committee, we have a community mental health nurse, and most of our members also have mental health first aid training. So we always encourage people to reach out and we can help point them in the right direction with resources. This year, the Darkness into Light Walk will take place virtually on Saturday, May 12th. So more details will be following in the coming weeks on how all of that's going to work. So keep an eye on our social media channels. So additionally, when the pandemic hit, I got involved with the Irish COVID support group. So that is now the brand Irish in BC that some of you might know. It was originally set up by the Irish Women's Network and the Irish Consulate. And the primary objective is we're a group that help communicate and connect all of the Irish in BC through both an online newsletter as well as through a strong social media presence. But as a support group, mental health really is the backbone of everything that we do. As we formed during the pandemic, we were dealing with lots of questions and issues as the situation was so uncertain. Last summer, we put together a mental health panel with some members of the Irish community just to chat through some of the common issues faced as a result of the pandemic and how it was affecting their mental health. So on that panel, we heard from a working mother who was trying to homeschool as well as work from home. We heard from a recruiter about how many people had lost their jobs or how many people were like struggling to try and figure out how to adjust to working from home. We spoke to a mental health nurse. We spoke to those whose hobbies were taken away, such as team sports, as I'm sure many in the GA will recognize. And then from that conversation, we put together some videos for our social media to help normalize feelings such as the guilt of being so far away from family, changes in work or relationships due to the pandemic, and also the common anxiety around immigration issues, which unfortunately a lot of us have gone through. We received great feedback from those that viewed those videos. So we knew there was an audience out there that appreciated feeling like they weren't the only ones feeling like that. So we decided to go one step further and we put on an introductory course to cognitive behavioral therapy. Initially, we ran 2 sessions in December, and we are currently in between another 2 sessions at the moment. The idea is to introduce this form of self-therapy to those who themselves are struggling as a taster of something they could look into in the future for themselves if they like the concept, and also for those just to build up their mental health toolkit for their future selves or to have on hand for friends in need. It's a completely anonymous form of group therapy, and so far we have gotten amazing feedback from this. And also just a shout out to the Irish Consulate on getting the funding together for those workshops. That's much appreciated from everyone in the community. So from my experience, these are the ways that the organizations that I'm involved with have adjusted or developed due to the pandemic. And I'm now going to pass it over to some of the amazing ladies that we have on the panel today, who are also going to give us a bit of an intro to themselves and the organizations that they're involved with, as well as chat through some of the common impacts they've discovered through their work with regards to COVID-19. So first, I will hand it over to Susie Newman from the Orchard Recovery Centre.
Thank you so much, Kate. Lovely to hear you. That's a hard act to follow. I'm Susie Newman. I am a substance use disorder therapist at the Orchard Recovery Centre on a magical little place called Bowen Island. Um, and I'm also a person in long term recovery, which I'm always very open about because I believe that it makes we need a lot more access and for people to be able to ask questions, not necessarily in a formal situation. Um, I'm so excited to be a part of this. I'm passionate about getting involved in anything to do with recovery. The fact that this is Irish, fantastic, and Irish women, which are just like the best. I'm also very privileged to work with my good friend Maura here, Maura Dernan, who also, among her many other jobs, works at the Orchard Recovery Centre. Um, but I came to Vancouver in 2004 and already in recovery. I'm 25 years in recovery this year. But and when I came here, I was had been in banking for 18 years, so rather a different career change. And I had the opportunity to do a practicum in the Orchard in 2008, and they kept me. So I'm still there this amount of time later, and it is my passion, my delight. I can't say publicly that I do it for free, but possibly. I no, I just love it. It gives my life meaning and purpose. It gives my recovery meaning and purpose, and it is just the most important thing I do, apart from my children and animals. Um, in saying that, just because this is around COVID and of course St. Bridget, and I've done quite a bit of reading about St. Bridget, who's the reason that we're doing all this too. Um, and whether it's mythological or historical or religious, it's the idea that she was a pagan goddess and then kind of assimilated into more organized religion to have her place there. But predominantly, she was about hope and also women and women's issues, predominantly women's health. So I found that very interesting. I do find that very interesting in the context of what we're talking about today or this evening, because that's that's where my biggest passion is. Um, Many, even in the addiction world, some of the literature is absolutely stands the test of time, but some of the language is quite archaic and very much kind of um, caters to men, as they were the major alcoholics, of course, in the 1930s when the first fellowship, AA fellowship, was set up. So, given that being a part of this, the Irish piece, the St. Bridget piece, and the addiction piece, which very much goes segues straight into mental health. Um, the DSM-5 quotes addiction as a substance use disorder or an alcohol use disorder. There are a number of criteria in that, but what it does indicate above all is that addiction is a mental disorder. And what that means, in my experience, both personally and professionally, is that people reach a point in their social drinking or using um, of no return, which means that the brain is now compromised, the neural pathways in the brain are compromised, and the frontal lobe executive thinking is compromised, thereby removing the ability to make a decision. So we could say, kind of, well, why does somebody become an addict? Or, everybody starts using something in high school, whether it's drinking with their friends or smoking a joint or whatever. But for that to kind of get to a point of where it tips over into addiction, nobody, in my belief, becomes an addict just from using a substance too much. It is always a case of self medicating, and it is almost always rooted in childhood. And so, for me, addressing this issue, especially with clients, the biggest thing we can give them is hope. And that's also what spring out of darkness into the light, all of that is about hope and the ability to carry that. But I also know from all of from the work I do is that speaking to that neurological piece is that addiction is also known as a biopsychosocial disease, which means that it affects one biologically, psychologically, and behaviorally. So we can see that. You know, any other disease often gets kind of a certain degree of sympathy or empathy, but unfortunately, addiction in the manner that it displays itself often turns loved ones against people because addiction looks like such a selfish disease. And that's true because when it gets to a point of addiction, the addict will choose alcohol or drugs over everything, even their loved ones. And that's what it looks like. And, you know, dealing with the families of love of clients that we have too, I often remind them whilst providing as much support, which we do at the Orchard. We have kind of pretty intense family programming, which is amazing because I think that that's provides support to everybody, for families in understanding the disease of addiction and for clients to kind of start rebuilding trust and relationships with family. But no matter how much the addict hurts people around them, I can tell you that it's not even close to the hurt that the addict is experiencing. Nobody wants to be a drug addict. Nobody falls into it. It is a desperate need not to feel and to medicate those emotions. And so, thank goodness, again, along the subject of hope, that recovery is possible. And it's possible for everyone. There are no exceptions. We call it being terminally unique. If somebody thinks, well, that they're different, or nobody knows the way their brain thinks, or they think differently to everybody else, because that's another thing addicts often feel, is feeling completely disassociated from the world, completely and utterly alone, and completely isolated. And then addiction, of course, takes that even further into isolation. And it's no surprise, it's no wonder when we think about it that solitary confinement is considered one of the worst tortures we can inflict on another human being alone. So, for me, the biggest message of hope around addiction is the quote I have in my office is that Nick Warren originally mentioned it was that the opposite to addiction is connection. And that is absolutely true. And, you know, hearing you speak, Kate, as well, on Irish people here in Vancouver and feeling at a loose end or not having anybody to connect with, when we talk about suicide, the exact same thing. People feel so utterly alone that there is no other way. And suicide is a huge part of addiction, and which also gives us reason to acknowledge that the disease of addiction must be pretty strong for it to override our most primal mechanism, which is survival. It overrides that. If I have a group of people and I ask them, how many of you have been suicidal? Half of them will raise their hand. If I ask how many of you would just have been okay if you just didn't wake up tomorrow, all of the hands go up. So that's where addiction brings people very, very close to suicide, and often an accidental overdose or actively suicide. So it's very much, what would I say, pertinent to this whole conversation, whether it's about mental health, whether it's about hope, whether it's into the light, around suicide, all of that. But addiction, if people were to actually put the real reason on death certificates, not just a fall down the stairs or cirrhosis of the liver or heart failure or various other things that are actually death by cocaine or alcohol or so many others, it would be absolutely off the charts, the number one killer. And we look at COVID as the pandemic that's happening now. We also have an epidemic, an opiate epidemic, which is claiming lives everywhere. And that's kind of been very quiet. We've all heard about it, but not a lot is being done. So when we have the pandemic, what I love about where recovery goes is that here we are on Zoom. I can honestly say that we must have been 2 days into shutdown and AA was up on Zoom. And, you know, and people immediately were connected and on and together and whatever, because we need our tribe. So that's speaking to the Irish people too. We need our tribe. We need to belong to something. And for people, addicts, who have felt that they didn't belong anywhere, that they didn't fit in anywhere, where they felt completely different to almost everybody. I used to say everybody looked like they had an instruction book for life, and I lost mine on the way. And, and that's often how an awful lot of people feel in addiction. They just feel different from as far back as they can remember. So, how do we connect then? So, we're lucky. In fact, if you're an addict and you move to Vancouver, you're really lucky because you'll meet loads of people in meetings and whatever. And honest to goodness, for me, when I moved here, it was the biggest social group that I just, because when people are are in recovery, the impetus to stay clean is a desire to live. So it's pretty important that you do the things that are suggested to stay sober. It's life or death. So when people gather together with that in mind, the reality of being real and not superficial BS is much needed. It's vital. We don't do the, oh, so how are you and where do you work and what do you do for a living? It's not about that. This is about staying alive and about getting real with your feelings. And I have known people who have come to meetings who have not been any, not or not in addiction or whatever, and have just come to support somebody, and they have walked out the door in tears. They have been so moved. I've known pastors and various people who have come again, and also I had one very good friend who came to me, and he said he was in tears at the end of it, and he said, "If I could only bring that to Sundays, if I could only bring what you have here." So the other part of that, and this is bringing Bridget back into it, is that a very big part of staying sober is having a faith in a higher power, a power greater than you, whatever that is. The old timers would say, all you need to know about God is that you're not it. And so we are very much uh, subscribers to that. And where I work is it's a private treatment center. It's unapologetically a 12-step program. Um, in my view, that's the thing that gets most people sober and keeps them sober. There are lots of other ways, and I'm not saying that that's the only way whatsoever. Therapy is also a part of that, and everything else we provide, whether it's group therapy, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, all those things are beneficial into doing this thing called life. And so I'm just trying to think, there is so much to say on this subject. There is so much dialogue we could have. We could be on for a full day. And to kind of narrow the little pieces down to be able to make certain points. I think the other thing we also have to recognize with COVID and how it has isolated people, that it has been on practically every country website, is that the drinking is going up, the self medicating is going up, the domestic abuse is going up as a result of those things. And, we can talk about opiate addiction, we can talk about marijuana addiction, which is very marginalized and very minimized. Um, we can talk about, but the number one of all of those disorders, the one that causes the greatest grief and the greatest domestic violence and upset and abuse, is alcohol. And the one that's readily available and, of course, legal, even though marijuana is now. However, I believe that there's going to be an awful lot of help needed when we finally do come out of lockdown. I encourage anybody who's alone to reach out somehow, somewhere, to someone, because we need each other. We are a social species and we cannot survive alone. We absolutely can't. And for anybody to think that they're different or odd or not like everybody else, to put that quite harshly, that's ego, because you're not. In fact, many of us haven't had an original thought in our lives. They've all been thought before. We certainly haven't had an original feeling. They've all been felt before. So we're not that different. But people try often when they're denying their addiction will look for the differences rather than the similarities. And it's important, even as human beings, to look for the similarities because that's how we connect. We are not different and we need each other. And so, even being a part of this and St. Bridget and being an Irish woman and all of that is just so important for us to know and to show others that there is a way, there are other ways, and it is life or death, and it's really important. Um, and we'll let Maura go on to concurrent disorders with addiction, which is a whole other ballgame. Um, but you know, those are very much a part of the difficulty sometimes with people getting sober. Also, to kind of point out that there are an awful lot of diagnoses made, um, not erroneously so much as in kind of the addict giving erroneous information, because many symptoms of certain disorders can look like just untreated addiction, and so sometimes, but they have to be treated concurrently, you know. So I think from that point of view, and from what I have to say on this subject, is just that hope is there, recovery is there, we're not alone, and I wish you all well. Thank you.
I am Dr. Maura Dernan. I don't know if I can you hear me all right? I am taken over from Susie. As you have heard already, Susie and I work together and kill each other half the time. But I can't think of a better person to work with in my life as a counselor. And she's been, I'll tell you, given me a few words of wisdom along the way too. So she's fantastic, and I highly recommend her counseling if you're feeling the need. I'm going to quickly do a bit, refer to what Susie's talked about already, and then transition from that into the overlap, as she mentioned, with concurrent disorders. I think the one thing I want to point out is what Susie said. She used the word in different ways. Is that what we seek right now is in recovery, in human essence of being in these times, is connectedness, to be connected to other people. And if you look on the CAMH website, which is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, it has the headline "Apart, Not Alone." And that is, I want you to have that focus, because as Susie says, you are not the first person who's ever had these thoughts. You know, it is a common thread. And that isn't to say that it isn't personally devastating to you, the things that people go through, but it is something that we've seen, we know, and we know you can get better. One of my favorite things about COVID, if you will, is that ironically, you know, my patients now can pick up and go to an AA Zoom meeting online anywhere, California, Australia, or for that matter, Dublin, you know, so or Wexford or whatever, you know. So you actually, there is a kind of a novelty quality to that, where you can just sit and listen and connect with people and feel that, because at the end of the day, it is about authenticity, you know, no BS. And that is what is just basic to getting better here. And I'm going to just mention, before I get into the other overlapping parts, is that if you are suffering from, and obviously there's the opioids out there, all of that. I work out at a clinic in Surrey as well, called Alliance Clinic, where I do opiate therapy. But I would say to you, if there is anybody out there who is drinking heavily to the point of really feeling like they're needing help or out of control, do not try and stop on your own. Go to someone like me. Go to your doctor who is educated in this, in how to help you detox safely, because right now detoxes are overflowing, but it can be done relatively safely at home. So I would just ask that you do that. Alcohol withdrawal is a serious condition if you're not in, if you're, you know, you've been drinking fairly heavily. So we take that seriously. There are, the other thing I just wanted to mention is that depending where you all are, there are resources around you in your local mental health places that you can access. So for example, if you're downtown, Three Bridges Clinic, which is Vancouver Coastal Health, or the West End Mental Health Team, or if you're out in Tri-Cities area, there's an excellent mental health services out there, and North Shore, Stepping Stones, and so on. I think Surrey is a bit overwhelmed at the minute, but Langley is actually pretty good too. So if you're feeling that way, connect. You have to connect, and just Google your local mental health and substance use services, and there are counselors who will do some limited counseling with you there. I think what Kate was talking about was superb in terms of an introduction to cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm going to talk about that a little more. So the other thing I want to leave you with on that is the thought that if you have coexisting depression and alcohol, substance use, whatever it is, they are both legitimate medical conditions. And as Susie said, there are actual changes in your brain, little peanut in your brain called the nucleus accumbens. And it actually gets to a point where we can see on imaging studies that you actually cross over how your brain responds when you're actually gone into addiction. So we know these changes happen. It is not your fault if you are struggling with this, but I'm saying there is just like if you were a diabetic, I would say to you, fine, it's not your fault you got the diabetes, but it is now your responsibility to manage it. And personal accountability is part of this too. So having said that, the other thing I just wanted to make a point of is that if you have depression or anxiety and you have substance use, the depression and anxiety will never get better until you first reduce the substance use part of it. So I want you to take that away. You can be on Cipralex or Prozac or whatever it is, and if you're still drinking, it's not going to work for you. So until you are able to kind of start to look for help to deal with that, you will continue to suffer. Alcohol is a depressant, even if it's not, acutely feels better in the moment, it's depressant later on. So having said that, I'm going to kind of throw the substance use stuff to some side. There's lots of resources, and Susie's mentioned some, and Kate has mentioned some things as well. With depression and anxiety, it sucks right now for people because isolation is part of what's happening for us. And again, when you are feeling that depressed, it feels horrible. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to shower. You don't want to do anything. You feel ashamed of saying this. But it becomes more and more important, as Kate was talking about with the darkness into light and stuff. To actually take those first steps is actually the hardest. If you can make yourself do those things and look for help, it is a medical condition. Most doctors, and I'm not going to say all, because as you and I well know, there are some that you click with and some you don't, and that most doctors have a really good understanding. Mental health is more than half of what family doctors do. And so, we will not just necessarily throw you on medicine, but you might end up on something if you go through that process. So I think it is just to have the courage to reach out for help, to see what your situation is. A doctor will assess you, will decide if medication is right. If you've got rid of your managed to sort of stop drinking or whatever it is for the time being, and giving yourself a chance to heal and connect with the program. Those are some of the most important things you can do. Things that you can do that aren't medicine are, one of the most important ones is what Kate mentioned, which is CBT, stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. And Susie is skilled in that. Kate has offered you some things, and I am going to pass on to Gillian at the end to put on her information website, some other resources. One I would say that is accessible traditionally through your family doctor that is particularly good is called Bounce Back. And it is a program of about 5 or 6 sessions of free counseling that is done over the telephone with you. It used to be referral for through a family doctors. I'm not even certain that it is necessary now, but they will actually contact your family doctor on your behalf now, I think. And the one requirement they have is that you have stopped drinking or whatever before they'll deal with the depression part. But they will do more of what Kate was talking about with the CBT, and they'll carry that forward. And then there are other resources to go through. One of the ones I personally really like is called the Mood Disorders Association of BC. They are a nonprofit, and they have a lot of resources, a lot of information. I think they're offering some free education and stuff, and so on. And although the the Centre of Addiction and Mental Health, which is CAMH, is based out of Toronto, they have a wealth of information that's sort of just to educate yourself about what's happening. About, what is depression, what is anxiety, what is going on for me, try and understand it a bit better. Um, the the other thing I would say then is, if you go to your family doctor, you may or may not get put on medication. If you do, we know that severe depression is best treated by a combination, and anxiety, by a combination of the right medicine and CBT together. Sometimes you're so depressed or anxious or whatever it is that you actually can't bring yourself to do the work of the CBT without first bringing yourself up a little bit with the right medicine. So I encourage you not to kind of say, oh no, don't do it, but to explore it and see if it's right for you. The other thing I wanted to really say is that there are things over and above this that you can do for yourself. And that can be as diet and exercise are actually huge. I know family members now who have suffered from mental health issues, significant mental health issues, and the research does show that if you actually do, significant exercise during the week, sort of 45 minutes a day, and it can be brisk walking, it can be whatever, but just to do something over time, it actually decreases the inflammation in your brain, and that is one of the causes of the depression. So it is actually a proven therapy, and in fact, in addiction, it's even more being shown to have an impact on throwing the old new neurons out there and making things regenerate and so forth. But it really is having an impact. Diet is also being shown to be very important. Your omega-3s, your green leafy vegetables, you know yourself what you should be doing. None of us do it at times, but you know what it is. It is actually important in mental health things. So I would really encourage you all to kind of try and get on the Weight Watchers app or whatever it is, and do a little bit of something every day. It's starting that habit is like trying to turn the car without the power steering when you start, but it actually starts to pick up steam if you keep faith with it. So I know we're kind of short on time-ish here. So the last thing I'm just going to mention, and I don't know if Gillian has this, is that there are some smartphone apps as well. There is the Mind Shift app, and there's the Headspace app. The Mind Shift one, I think, is free. And the Headspace one, I think, is a free trial, and then whatever, $12.99 a month. You can try various ones. There's also one which I really like called Insight Timer, which is it's more of a meditation thing, but you can get apps for sleep and anxiety and meditations and stuff to help you with it. So there are things that you can do on your own. I really encourage you to do those. I really encourage you to look for the resources to help you stop drinking, and to reach out for help to your doctor as well, to do that safely and properly, and then to talk about what you're feeling. Again, as Susie says, with depression and the alcohol or marijuana or opiates, whatever it is, it's actually getting down to be raw, authentic honesty without shame, which is where treatment comes in. that is going to be the core of you starting to get better. And as Susie said at the end, there is hope. There is absolute every reason to believe that you will be able to get better and have a good life. You might feel like you're swimming through mud right now, but there is a better way through this. And, you know, many of us have been there in the past and can speak to it, as, for example, good old Susie herself. So it is, and I've been through depression, and I know what it can feel like. So there is no shame in this. There is honesty, and that is where we all need to go. Okay. The last thing I want to leave you with is just think of our forebears, like, you know, 200 years ago, they all trotted over in their famine boats and whatnot, and never had a nary hope of coming back to Ireland. And at least you can actually reach out and connect, and the help is there if you're willing to look for it. Okay. And I'll pass it over to I think it's Gillian, right?
Yeah, thanks so much, Maura. That was great. And thanks, Susie and Kate. Hey, everyone. So I'm Gillian Goulding. I'm delighted to be on this panel tonight with Susie, Maura, and Kate. Last year, I attended the St. Bridget's Festival in person in Vancouver, and I was actually in the audience when Dr. Maura, Susie, and Amy from Darkness into Light, and Cathy from the Irish Canadian Immigration Centre were speaking. I thought it was such a brilliant festival last year. I was quite new to Vancouver myself at the time, and I really went away from it just like feeling like it was such a great weekend to inspire Irish women, to let us know for mental health over here in Vancouver and throughout Canada, that there's actually just so many organizations here, like Susie and Maura were saying, and Kate, that like there's so many organizations here to help you with your mental health, to help you if you do have an addiction. There's so many good resources here. So I went away from that talk last year just with a lot of comfort and a lot of hope for my move to Canada and working in this field, because I was like, it's just so brilliant that there is so many resources there. So I am the social care advisor in Vancouver for the Irish Canadian Immigration Centre, and I work alongside our national social care advisor, Micheál O'Rourke, who some of you may know. The Irish Canadian Immigration Centre was established in December of 2011, and it offers outreach and information in areas such as employment, social services, and immigration. It's a non-for-profit organisation, and there's no fees for our services. So we encourage any Irish immigrants living here to reach out. I know firsthand myself, being a new immigrant in a country, that things can be quite overwhelming, and it can be difficult to learn how systems work in a new country when you first get here. So, and now with COVID-19 restrictions being in place as well, being an Irish immigrant, no matter how many years you've been living abroad, for some people, I feel like this has brought up a whole new set of worries and uncertainties, especially with travel and everything. So it really, even if you're not a new immigrant, due to COVID, it is bringing up a lot for people. As the social care advisor in Vancouver, just to let you know a bit about my role and create some awareness for you about some resources here, I share how to access health and wellbeing information. This includes mental health services in Vancouver and the BC area. And then our national social care advisor, Micheál, does this for individuals throughout Canada. And like the other speakers were saying today, it is really so important to look after your own mental health. It's very easy, like for all of us, to like push things to the side and say, I'll deal with that another day. But we all know, like, the longer you leave it, the more difficult it can be to start the process. So I really agree with what the other panelists have said tonight about that. The first step is always the hardest, but once you make it, it's the best step you've ever made, really. So I really do reach out to people for support. For Irish immigrants living in Vancouver and the BC area, it's really important for you to know that there are so many different services here to support you with your mental health. There's also so many Irish organisations that are now offering free virtual appointments and phone support to Irish immigrants living in Canada. So I just wanted to make some people on the call aware of that today. The Samaritans have recently announced that they have a direct line now for Irish immigrants in Canada, and you can call them 24/7. So if you're looking for support and you're over here and you prefer to maybe speak to someone at home in Ireland that you feel they may understand your individual needs better, that line is there 24/7. Helplink.ie also, they have the Irish Abroad Counselling Service. This is a free service where they offer 6 online virtual counselling appointments. So like Maura and Susie were saying earlier on about like linking in with Ask Your Family Doctor, go to a counsellor. This is a great way to even get you into counselling if you're like thinking about maybe, you know, in-person counselling down the line and stuff here. Maybe virtual appointments with an Irish counsellor might be the way to go to get you started in the process. So yeah, so we'll share those details also in our Vancouver guide for you. I just wanted to say as well, like everyone was saying today, the internet, as we can see now, because we're on Zoom this year for the festival, which is brilliant. And I'm also loving that it's a week long this year because I'm getting to go to loads of the talks, so it's great. But the internet is such an excellent resource for us all to find different services, to have the Zoom calls, to do everything. However, we all know as well, the internet can be an overwhelming place. Like Kate was saying earlier on, you can kind of get a bit lost when you type into the search bar, Doctor Vancouver or Counsellor Vancouver or Mental Health Vancouver, because like really we all know there's going to be pages among pages come up, and it can just become kind of quite draining for you to go through them all, trying to find the service that best matches your needs, because all of our needs are different. Even if people say, that's the thing with mental health as well, you know, everyone's mental health journey is different, everyone's mental health issues are different, you know, so what might work for one person mightn't work for another. So that's why it's great there's so many resources, but also it can be draining looking for them. So that's kind of where we come in, myself and Micheál, in our roles for the Irish Canadian Immigration Centre. If you go to our webpage, so if you Google the Irish Canadian Immigration Centre and go to the mental health resource page, you'll find my contact details if you're living in BC or Vancouver, and you'll also find Micheál's contact details. So you could send me an email, we can communicate via email, phone call, text message, and we can set up a call. And then I could help you, give you some assistance if you're searching for mental health or health and wellbeing services here in Vancouver. And I can help you signpost to some organizations that may provide the service that we feel that might be best suited to you. Just remember as well, I want to say to everyone, like, no question is a silly question. I've been working in the social care field now since 2008 and in various roles throughout my career, but every role has the same one thing in common, and it's supporting people with their mental health. Because really, if you're a social care worker, a counsellor, a doctor, we're all supporting each other with our mental health. So no question is silly. And if I have the answer to your question, I certainly will provide you with the information. And if I can't, I'll be honest and I will try and signpost you to where I believe they can actually answer that question. Looking for a doctor or like low cost free counselling services, addiction helplines, how to apply for MSP are some examples of regular inquiries we get. If you, like I was saying on the webpage, Maura had said it there earlier about resources in Vancouver, and after this call as well, I'll actually update it with some recommendations from the other panelists, because it's a never-ending, it's a working document all the time because we always hear new recommendations, which is great. But if you go to our mental health resource page, you'll find the Vancouver Resource Guide. Here you'll find a list of the kind of most used common services that we find people are inquiring about or we feel are really good for people to know about. So they're like different helplines, different links to hospitals, gambling lines, addiction helplines. So there's a lot of good services there. You'll also see on that page as well, because obviously we're so short in time today, but I just want to let you guys know about where you can find resources and maybe do another bit of research after this if it's got your mind thinking. There's also some podcasts on the mental health resource page where we've had different podcasts with people speaking about loneliness as a new immigrant, different types of self-care you can do, being a mother for the first time when you're living abroad, you know, different podcasts there. There's also a webinar that has been recorded that we did in the past, just talking about all the different resources in the resource guide and about different supports throughout Canada. So that's another link that you could check out if you're looking for more information after this. I agree with all the panelists again. I think if COVID-19 myself has taught us anything, it's to remind you how important your health is to you. I think looking after your mental health should just be as much of a priority to you as looking after your physical health, really. Like Maura was saying, it is good to be eating healthy, go out for your walks, do your bit of exercise, but also mental health, I think, should like be par with that. I wanted to just remind people as well about the option of calling the mental health support line here in Vancouver. The number is 310-6789. It's in our Vancouver resource guide as well, but I just always like to remind people about that mental health line because it's 24/7. It's a free support. They provide emotional support and they give you information and resources specific to the mental health resources in BC. And I always say to people, this can be a good option if you're like on a waiting list, maybe to see a counsellor or a doctor, and you're just finding those days a bit tougher. The mental health line is there. And yeah, like the girls were saying as well, like just remember to be kind to yourself. Spend some time maybe thinking of self-care plans is something I always talk to people about. A self-care plan is for your mind, body and soul. It can be as basic as you want it to be, or it can be as detailed as you want it to be. But the main thing that I think people should think of when they're doing a self-care plan is set yourself some realistic goals. Do small attainable goals. Don't set yourself too many goals too fast, because then you'll get disheartened if you don't complete them all. Small attainable goals. I would also say whenever you do a self-care plan, write down the supportive people in your life when you're in that good headspace and you're thinking about your self-care plan. Because if you write down those supportive people there, maybe when you need to go and get the self-care plan, you might think to reach out to those people. So that's just like a little tip I say to people. So yeah, remember to be kind to yourself, do a self-care plan. Also self-soothing kits, Google a self-soothing kit and they're amazing. They're an amazing tool for people working from home that maybe are like going through a few things at home and might be getting a bit anxious during the day, when they're on all their work calls. A self-soothing kit is something you can it incorporates all your senses. So, like if you need something to calm down, you need something for in your hand when you're talking, different things. There's like ones that you can bring with you on the go or ones that you can do at home. So self-soothing kit is another thing I would recommend people to look into just to help you with day to day at the moment. And I suppose for me, finishing up, all I'd like to say to people is in a crisis, please call the helplines. That is exactly what they're there for people to call when they need to. Stay connected by speaking to your friends, speak to your family, and just reach out to any support that you need to. That's what we're all here for. So that's kind of it for me. I know we're running short in time, so thanks everyone.
Amazing. Thank you, Gillian.
welcome.
Thank you, Maura, and thank you, Susie. Such a wide range of issues covered there in such a short space of time, which is amazing, just to get all of your individual perspectives. We have a few minutes still to go. We're going to have a quick look at the Q&A here. But first of all, before we wrap up, I would love to know where you guys are joining us from today. So if you have a second there, just pop in what part of the world you're in at the moment, as we always love to hear. So I'll just give that a few seconds to run. Perfect. And just for interest purposes, lots in BC, few in the East Coast, few in the US and Ireland. Wow, that's a good time difference there. Fair play to you. Okay, great. Always good for us to know. And then we're going to have a quick chat now just about something that we were kind of in between ourselves having a chat about earlier, which is the power of gratitude. So I would just love to know as well, anyone that currently practices gratitude. And hopefully by the end of it, we might have us all doing it. Just give that another couple of seconds. Impressive group, guys. Really good. Yeah. Well, right now I'll invite all of the panelists to unmute themselves. And yeah, I just thought we could have a quick chat about gratitude. I know we all briefly chatted about it earlier. And Gillian, I know you were kind of mentioning the self-soothing kits and the self-care, and it obviously kind of falls into that. So from your experience, like, have you heard of people having kind of powerful results from gratitude? And I'm sure you practice it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have, like, I think for gratitude, it can be so many different things for people. It can be keeping a gratitude journal. It can just be verbalizing your gratitude. Something that we do sometimes in work actually is we do a rose and a thorn. When we're talking gratitude is like the rose of the day. So it's kind of saying, like, we might start with the thorn and say something that's like, something that was a struggle today, but then the rose was this. So yeah, I would practice it regularly. And yeah, I think it's good to be grateful for things and kind of ground yourself and remember, yeah, what your things you're focusing on. So I'm today grateful that the weather was lovely and I got home in time for this.
I'm going to say that it's gratitude is actually sort of it sounds a bit trite. It sounds a bit twee kind of to say it that way, but it's actually the basis of starting to feel better. And I think maybe Susie could talk a bit more about that because she'd be the expert.
Yeah.
Oh my God, hold me back. I could talk about gratitude all day. Um, we say a grateful alcoholic and addict will never use. And the reason is that we go into such a negative downward spiral in any mental health area. If we know it takes 90 days to train the brain to do any new habit. And as Maura said, and that the beginning of that is so difficult. But if you keep going, and this speaks to recovery too, which is why we suggest 90 meetings in 90 days and blah blah blah. But that it takes that amount of time for the brain to now start doing something automatically. A gratitude list is something that my clients literally roll their eyes at me now. I am just so on a gratitude list. If you were to have a journal, and I'll tell you a funny story. I did this with clients, like I've been telling them this for years, and I was going through a crisis myself a couple of years ago, whatever. And I can tell you guys that I am on day 973 of a gratitude list. So what that looks like, I just want to tell you, is if you get a journal or a pretty notebook from chapters or whatever, and you write 3 to 5 things every night that you're grateful for, I promise you, it will change your life, because then you start to actually notice in the course of the day things that you start to be grateful for. And it can start with the smallest things. That it was a lovely day, that we're here, that we're connected, that whatever it looks like, it doesn't matter, but it grows and it grows and it grows. And you find more and more to be grateful for. And when you're in a place of gratitude, you can't go down. And so for me, it is the singular greatest tip in recovery, in life, in anything, is to cultivate gratitude.
Amazing. Yeah, no, totally agree. I personally do practice it myself. Sometimes I'm better than other times. But yeah, like it totally can change your perspective and just that internal monologue, and naturally start thinking of other things. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I do just see one question here in the Q&A that I want to throw to you, Susie, as I think it's an important one. Someone has said, do you have any suggestions for supporting or loving a parent who is an addict?
Absolutely, I do. Go to Al Anon. Al Anon is the sister group of AA in Italy, and it was set up like by the wife of the original alcoholic Bill Wilson. But it is the singular most important thing that you can do to help the addict and yourself. In a good Al Anon meeting, they don't actually talk about the addict. They talk about how addiction has affected you. And it is a place, again, of such connection and such support and it's free. We tend to think, oh, well, if it's worth anything, it's going to cost money. It's not. And this is the beauty of it. And again, it's also online. It's also on Zoom. You can go on, you can, you can Google that too. But it is the best possible way that anybody can get help and solace and comfort and connection and support for themselves, but also in supporting the addict too. That you're not going to, allow inappropriate behavior, that you will support them if that's what they want to do, is to stay clean. But I'm also really clear, and Maura made a great point, that we take, addiction isn't anybody's fault, but recovery is your own responsibility. So people wanting to help an addict, don't enable or walk on eggshells around them. Their recovery is their responsibility. Your recovery is your responsibility. And Al Anon is the best place you can go for help in that, bar none.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm sure that that's going to be really helpful for the participant who asked. So yeah, unfortunately, we are kind of at time at the moment. So what I just want to mention is a thank you to all of the speakers. Thank you to Maura, to Gillian, to Susie. I'm sure everyone has learned so much. I could sit here for hours and talk to you ladies more and more. And I do want to note as well that the recording of this session will also be on the St. Bridget's Festival YouTube channel. And if you do want to refer to onto anyone or take a look back yourself for any of the tips. And also thank you to all of the St. Bridget's team, all behind the scenes, who made this whole week possible and made today possible. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us as well. Much appreciated. And do not forget to check out the rest of the events throughout the week. There are some really exciting ones that are coming up. So check out the St. Bridget's Festival Vancouver website and you'll see the list there, and you can still RSVP to them all. So thank you again to all of the panelists for joining us and to all attendees.
Thank you. Thanks everyone, and thank you for organizing. It's a great week.
Great week. Thanks.